Shata Shri Shimade Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivrajacharya Stottara Shata Shri Shimad Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai Prem Se Kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Aindriyaha Sargaha Yaha Tu Jnana Kriya Atmakaha Bhuta Sargastritiyastu Bhuta Sargastritiyastu Tanmatra Dravya Shaktiman Tanmatra Dravya Shaktiman Chaturtha Indriya Sargo Chaturtha Indriya Sargo
Yastu Jnana Kriyatmakaha Bhuta Sarga
Tanmatra Dravya Shaktiman Chaturtha Indriya Sargo Yastu Jnana Kriyatmakaha
Bhuta Sarga Shaktiyastu Tanmatro Shaktiman Chaturtha Indriya Sargo Yastu Jnana Kriyatmakaha Bhuta Sarga Shaktiyastu Tanmatro Dravya Shaktiman Chaturtha Indriya Sargo Yastu Jnana Kriyatmakaha Bhuta Sarga Shaktiyastu Tanmatro Dravya Shaktiman Chaturtha Indriya Sargo Yastu Jnana Kriyatmakaha
Can you hear me, right? Mataji's? Bhuta Sargastritiyastu Yashaktiman Chaturtha Indriya Sargo Yastu Jnana Kriyatmakaha Bhuta Sargastritiyastu Shaktiman Chaturtha Indriya Sargo Bhuta, Sarga, creation of matter. Tritiyaha is the third. Tu, but. Tatmatraha, sense perception. Dravya, of the elements. Shaktiman, generator. Chaturtaha, the fourth. Aindriyaha, in the matter of the senses. Sarga, creation. Yaha, that which. Tu, but. Jnana, knowledge acquiring. Kriya, working. Atmakaha, basically. Translation by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. The sense perceptions are created in the third creation, and from these the elements are generated. The fourth creation is the creation of knowledge and of working capacity. So I'll also be covering 17, so I'll just go through the Sanskrit and I'll read the purport. Laikariko deva sarga panchama yanmayam manaha shashtastu tamasah sargo yastva bhuti kritas prabho. The fifth creation is that of the controlling deities by the interaction of the mode of goodness, of which the mind is the sum total. The sixth creation is the ignorant darkness of the living entity by which the master acts as a fool. Purport. The demigods and the higher planets are called devas because they are all devotees of Lord Vishnu. Vishnu bhakta smrto daiva asura tat viparyayaha. All the devotees of Lord Vishnu are devas or demigods, whereas all others are asuras. And that is the division of the devas and the asuras. Devas are situated in the mode of goodness of material nature, whereas the asuras are situated in the mode of passion or ignorance. The demigods or controlling deities are entrusted with departmental management of all the different functions of the material world. For example, one of our sense organs, the eye, is controlled by light. Light is distributed by the sun rays, and their controlling deity is the sun. Similarly, mind is controlled by the moon. All other senses, both for working and for acquiring knowledge, are controlled by the different demigods. The demigods are assistants of the Lord in the management of material affairs. After the creation of the demigods, all entities are covered by the darkness of ignorance. Each and every living being in the material world is conditioned by his mentality of lording it over the resources of material nature. Although the living entity is the master of the material world, he is conditioned by ignorance by the false impression of being the proprietor of material things. The energy of the Lord, called avidya, is the bewildering factor of the conditioned souls. The material nature is called avidya, or ignorance, but to the devotees of the Lord engaged in pure devotional service, this energy becomes vidya, or pure knowledge. This is confirmed in Bhagavad Gita. The energy of the Lord transforms from Mahamaya to Yogamaya and appears to pure devotees in her real feature. The material nature, therefore, appears to function in three phases: as the creative principle of the material world, as ignorance, and as knowledge. As disclosed in the previous verse, in the fourth creation, the power of knowledge is also created. The conditioned souls are not originally fools, but by the influence of a vidya function of material nature, they are made fools, and thus they are unable to utilize knowledge in the proper channel. By the influence of darkness, the conditioned soul forgets his relationship with the Supreme Lord and is overwhelmed by attachment, hatred, pride, ignorance, and false identification, the five kinds of illusion that cause material bondage. Om Ajnana Timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakya Chakshura Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Svayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Svapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yatahvara Kamalam Shri Guru and Vaishnavams Cha Shri Rupam Sagradatam Sahagana Raganatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sarvetam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shivashan Kanvitams Cha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagat Pete Gopisha Gopika Kanta Ratha Kanta Namostate Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Rathe Vrindavaneshwari Varishabhanu Sutta Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha Kalpatarubhyas Chakrapasundabhye Vachapatitanam Pavanipyo Vaishnavibhyo Namo Namaha Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Parishtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vikasa Swaminiti Namane Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Putale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swamini Tinamani Namaste Sarasvati Devi Gauravrani Pracharini Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschacharya Charini Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktivedanta Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So if we start just by looking at the beginning of the purport, the demigods and the higher planets are called devas because they are all devotees of Lord Vishnu. Vishnu Bhakta Smarto Daiva Asuras Tadviparyayaha. All the devotees of Lord Vishnu are devas or demigods, whereas all others are asuras. You read that and it seems like a pretty black and white perspective. It's like if you're not worshipping Lord Vishnu, you're essentially a demon, more or less. And Prabhupada is very point blank about that. This is a verse from the Padma Purana. If you pull up CC Adi Leela 391, just want to read that purport as well. Prabhupada essentially elaborates on the same first point that he's making here about the two classes of men, if you will, those who are known as devas and those who are known as the asuras. 91. Yeah. So you can go down to the, There are two classes of men in the created world. One consists of the demoniac and the other of the godly. The devotees of Lord Vishnu are the godly, whereas those who are just the opposite are called demons. As I said, this is a verse from the Padma Puran. Vishnu Bhaktas, or devotees in Krishna consciousness, are known as devas, demigods. Excuse me. Atheists who do not believe in God or declare themselves God are asuras. Asuras always engage in atheistic material activities, exploring ways to utilize the resources of matter to enjoy sense gratification. The Vishnu Bhaktas, Krishna conscious devotees, are also active, but their objective is to satisfy the Supreme Lord of Godhead, so the Supreme Personality of Godhead, by devotional service. Superficially, both classes may appear to work in the same way, but their purposes are completely opposite because of a difference in consciousness. Asuras work for personal sense gratification, whereas the devotees work for the satisfaction of the Supreme Lord. Both work conscientiously, but their motives are different. The Krishna consciousness movement is meant for devas or devotees. Demons cannot take part in Krishna conscious activities, nor can devotees in Krishna consciousness take part in demoniac activities or work like cats and dogs simply for sense gratification. Such activity does not appeal to those in Krishna consciousness. Devotees accept only the bare necessities of life to keep themselves fit to act in Krishna consciousness. The balance of their energy is used for developing Krishna consciousness, through which one can be transferred to the abode of Krishna by always thinking of him even at the point of death. So generally in philosophy, if you look, absolutism can mean, I guess, one or two things. There's, I guess, two different interpretations you could say. One can have an absolute perspective in thinking that essentially there's one universal truth, and this exists regardless of the ideas that come about from our own sense perception. So one could say absolutely that we are absolutists, because we obviously propound that there's absolute truth. On another hand, one can say absolutism in reference to, I don't want to say this, it's basically a more impersonal conception, thinking that everything is, in essence, all one, without proper understanding of the individual nature of these things. So the reason as to why Prabhupada's statement that all devotees of Vishnu are devas and those who are not are demons, why this is not actually just a black and white perception or perspective, you could say, is because as we've been covering, as we've gone throughout this third canto, the subject matter has largely been how Lord Brahma created the material world. And we've understood that it's been created, one could say in one sense, of course, for our enjoyment and attempting to enjoy separately from Krishna, but it's also ultimately created so that we can correct our attitudes and recognize our position of servitude to the Supreme Lord. So if we don't rectify that attitude, then we're forced to ultimately serve Maya. And this submission to the Supreme Lord can only be realized voluntarily. The submission that is forced in the name of love isn't actually love. So we're forced to sit here and try to serve Maya as a result. So two things. The devotees are referred to as devas, as it said. So it's because of this divine qualities that the devotees possess that you don't find in the demons. And then also because there's a recognition of the Supreme Lord as, of course, the cause of all causes. But if you read it, it says they're called devas or demigods, but simultaneously those who are devotees of the demigods are actually condemned as well. And the reason for that is because they're not recognizing the source of the opulences that of which one might worship the demigods for. So one has to view these things in proper light. So Yajante Sattavika Devan, this is, I should have wrote down the reference. I want to say this is, I know it's in Gita, it might be 11, chapter 11, but it's essentially stating that those in the mode of goodness worship the demigods. But the problem with that is that the mode of goodness is actually still a material contamination or contamination of the modes of material nature. And it can be conducive for cultivating these proper qualities that a devotee should have, but it's not the end-all, be-all. One should understand that. Material attachment is still present even in that. So we have to rise to Shuddha Sattva, which can only happen by engaging in devotional service. And that comes from associating with the pure devotees. Prabhupada says that the different qualities of the material modes of nature can be purified through association with persons who are of transcendental nature. So this verse, I think it's 3, I always mess up the number. Is it 325? Satam prasangan mama virya samvido bhavati hirtkarna rasayana kataha tajo sanadas avavarga vartamani. What's the last line? Shraddha bhaktir anukramishati. So this bhakti can ultimately be cultivated by hearing about the Supreme Lord and glory, and by hearing of the glories of the Supreme Lord from persons who are of this transcendental nature. So this is the position of the devotees. And devotees, if you notice, these are the real sadhus. We have so many different, as Maharaj has been harping on, especially if people have been listening to the last couple of lectures he's put out. Speaking of people who maybe they pose themselves as being learned, and maybe they are learned in the philosophy, but they're not actually real sadhus. So just as a surgeon cuts, they have to be very expert actually to cut into the body and make these incisions in order to heal somebody. That requires a lot of precision and a lot of learning, a lot of knowledge, a lot of practice. The sadhu, similarly, it doesn't just cut whimsically. He also is very expert in cutting ignorance with the sword of knowledge. So going ultimately to the subject matter in these two verses, the last 4 creations of the primary creation, Sarga. So this isn't created by Brahma, but by Lord Vishnu. The third creation is, well, the creations of all, I'll list them all. So we have the sense perceptions, which are created in the third creation, and from these the elements are generated. The fourth creation is the creation of knowledge and of working capacity. The fifth creation is that of the controlling deities by the interaction of the mode of goodness, of which the mind is the sum total. The sixth creation is the ignorant darkness of the living entity by which the master acts as a fool. So with this sense perception, this is a means for the false ego essentially to exhibit its attempt to enjoy material nature. And of course, in this futility, we see happiness and distress resulting from this. So when the impure senses interact with these material elements that have been generated, we find that the modes essentially continue to mix. It's described, I think it's in this canto. Maybe it was, I want to say, yeah, because I believe Mahotsa Prabhu, he spoke on this, how the 3 modes, they mix together, the 3 become 9, those 9 become 81, and then so on and so forth, and they expand into essentially all these different varieties of attempted enjoyment in the material world. And according to which mode kicks us the hardest, that's the mode by which we're controlled by, the most you could say. So in Gita chapter 3, verse 33, you don't have to pull this up, it's read, even a man of knowledge acts according to his own nature, for everyone follows the nature he has acquired from the three modes. And artificial repression can't change this. We take these bodies as a result of our desires, and we try to essentially fulfill those desires, but we see time and time again that it never actually works. We find ourselves time and time again upset and frustrated in these attempts. And it's by this sixth creation of ignorance that the living entity essentially takes these incessant kicks from Maya. So we see, as it says, the sense perceptions are created in the third creation, and from these, the elements are generated. So we know earth, wind, fire, ether, water. These are separated energies of Krishna, of Vasudeva. And it makes up the sense objects by which the conditioned souls try to enjoy. But the whole problem, of course, is that these elements, you don't find happiness separate from Krishna. That's the underlying principle that seems to come up time and time again. So I'll read from the purport. It says, each living entity, you can scroll down, it should be in the first paragraph. I'm sorry, it's the second paragraph. Each and every living being in the material world is conditioned by his mentality of lording it over the resources of material nature. Although a living entity is the master of the material world, he is conditioned by ignorance, by the false impression of being the proprietor of material things. So, this yastva bhuti kirtaf prabhoho, this abhuti kirtaha, this means by which one becomes foolish. Buddhi we know to be intelligence. Abhuti can be foolishness, but we could more specifically say, I guess, one without intelligence. This is how the conditioned soul is forced to act as a result of trying to enjoy separately. I haven't heard many people brought this up. I'm sure everybody's maybe at least come across this analogy or comparison that Prabhupada has made between the likening the jiva to a child who wants to have the moon, for example. So the child sees the moon, he looks up in the sky, and he cries to his mother that he wants to have it. And in order to satisfy that crying child, the mother gives him a mirror, and essentially it appears as though he has the moon in his hand, and this he's pacified, even though it's only a reflection of the real thing in and of itself. So the position of the living entity is very much the same, in that in one sense we have some sense of superiority, some sense of independence, and we're satisfied in that, or at least trying to find satisfaction. But that superiority is in the false sense, and therefore the enjoyment is also false, and it has no ultimate value. That's the underlying point. When we look at the fourth creation, it's of knowledge and the working capacity. So the jiva the nature of the soul is to be in some sort of activity, which is something basic we've understood. Specifically in servitude to something. If we don't serve Krishna, then we're forced to serve Maya, and that can be in the form of our friends, our family, our jobs, and so many other different things and different facets of society. So the jiva is forced to act. It's not something that we can avoid. And that action, that work, is according to knowledge, which is also under the control of the three modes of material nature. So it's sattvat sanjayate jnanam. From goodness, real knowledge can come, which is why even though it's a material contamination, it can be conducive for cultivating proper knowledge, cultivating the proper qualities that a devotee needs, and requires in engaging in devotional service. This is, I'm sorry, if you could pull up Gita chapter 14, verse 17. I want to go through a little bit of the Sanskrit. This is Rajaso Lobha Evacha, is from passion develops greed, and Pramada Mohao Tamaso from the mode of ignorance comes foolishness, madness, and illusion, or in ignorance. So when we look at the impersonalist view, they view the absolute truth with an impersonal mindset, and they also view all emanations which come from this to be impersonal. So Lord Brahma, in their mind, is at best an impersonal manifestation of the mode of passion. And it's said here, if we go forward, not to jump ahead to who might be giving class next. This is text 18. All of the above are natural creations, referring to Sarga, of course, of the external energy of the Lord. Now hear from me about the creations of Brahma, who is an incarnation of the mode of passion, and who, in the matter of creation, has a brain like that of the personality of Godhead. So, incarnation of the mode of passion, yes, but we just went through the whole description of how Lord Brahma is born from this lotus flower, which sprouts from the navel of Garbo Dakashaya Vishnu. Right? So, he can't possibly be impersonal because obviously he was born from a personality, right? So they're good. They're in the mode of goodness. One can say we'll see that some of these I haven't. I've heard it described by Vishnu Chitta Prabhu specifically. Some of these impersonalists can be, they're very sense controlled. So in quality maybe they might be in the mode of goodness, but their ignorance is completely, their knowledge is completely lost, and it's incomplete. And they ultimately think that because they act in Maya, the supreme truth also can't possibly have any activity, which is obviously problematic. It doesn't give a proper explanation of the absolute truth and a proper representation of Bhagavan. So the fifth creation, the controlling deities by the interaction of the mode of goodness, of which the mind is the sum total. I had a little bit of trouble when I was going through this because it describes that Vishnu creates the controlling deities, which I would assume to be reference to the demigods, but we understand that the bodies of the demigods are born from Lord Brahma. And of course, I mean, we have it says here, of course, of the first 6 creations, of the 9 creations, the first 6 are primary, the remaining 3, plus the demigods, it says in text, what is this? I believe it's text 30, no. Text 27, O good Vidura, the last 3 creations and the creation of demigods, the 10th creation, are Vaikrita creations, which are different from the previously described Prakrita, which is, again, the Sarga, which I'm describing or covering now. So, anyways, that's just a little bit of honesty on my end. But anyways, the underlying thing that I've at least understood from this is that we're ultimately powerless against the creation, which moves under the will of the Supreme Lord. We're controlled even by those who are controlled also by the modes of material nature. Mukunda Datta Prabhu in his classes, he was speaking about this time, this inconceivable, how it's inconceivable. You know, you can try to observe it and try to maybe even break down philosophically, I guess, what a moment is or try to capture, but that moment will be gone once it passes. So this time, essentially, material activity is completely reliant upon this in order to be carried out. And if we look, I want to go back to the purport. Let me see. Sorry, I'm jumping all over the place. Right, after the creation of the demigods, all entities are covered by the darkness of ignorance. Each and every living being in the material world is conditioned by his mentality of lording it over the resources of material nature. Although a living entity is the master of the material world, he is conditioned by ignorance, by the false impression of being the proprietor of material things. Forgive me. So we see this is an interesting statement Prabhupada makes, that although a living entity is the master of the material world, still he's conditioned by this ignorance. Again, because the superior nature, this master of material things, if you will, it comes from the quality of the jiva, but he's ignorant even of that. He's ignorant of the fact that he's of this superior energy of the Lord. And because of that, as is described, Kalki Prabhu spoke on this false ego, he improperly identifies with matter. And because of that, he's bound by his activities in the material world. So this superiority, it exists in realizing one's constitutional position as a servant to the Supreme Lord. And that's where the superiority comes from. Prabhupada goes on to say in the third paragraph, the energy of the Lord, called avidya, is the bewildering factor of the conditioned souls. The material nature is called avidya, or ignorance, but to the devotees of the Lord engaged in pure devotional service, this energy becomes vidya, or pure knowledge. So, I'll read on. This is confirmed in Bhagavad Gita. The energy of the Lord transforms from Mahamaya to Yogamaya and appears to pure devotees in her real feature. The material nature therefore appears to function in three phases: as the creative principle of the material world, as ignorance, and as knowledge, respectively. As disclosed in the previous verse, in the fourth creation, the power of knowledge is also created. The conditioned souls are not originally fools, but by the influence of the avidya function of material nature, they are made fools, and thus they are unable to utilize knowledge in the proper channel. And therefore, and we see this in society. There's actually, I've been working with Ali, ultimately we read on this retreat day, I guess we had, about from the treasures of the Briyat Mridanga, about contact Sankirtan. Does anybody remember that section? About the importance of following up. We have been amazing in the movement at distributing books, and this temple, of course, is known for distributing books, but we've been terrible with following up on people and actually seeing if they're taken to the process, how's their chanting going, how's their philosophical understanding, trying to bring them to the temple, and guide them along the path. It's kind of generally just not been something that's been of so much focus in the movement. So anyways, Ali has been looking at all these different tools that we can use, especially to help facilitate this. And it's amazing if you look, the extent to which specifically AI, all these different tools have progressed. But it's completely and totally misguided. And it's only used to facilitate sense gratification. So it's amazing in its own right, but it kind of just turns more into like a fast pass to hell, you could say, because there's so much sinful activity that can be facilitated by the use of these tools. But if they're actually used in Krishna service, we can see amazing things being done, and that's something at least I've noticed working with Ali. So one of the aspects of devotees is that they're not only expert in rendering devotional service, they're expert in engaging others in doing so as well. This is seen when we spoke of Jayananda Prabhu. People who had no inclination for engaging in devotional service, just pulled from whatever Maya they might have been in, and somehow end up finding themselves building like a Rath Yatra cart. I said that right? Rath Yatra, right? Okay. Building a cart, for example. Using any and every means to get the jiva to come back to his constitutional position as a servant of the Supreme Lord. The devotee is expert in this. And it's for this reason, essentially, that they should be served. It's at the last paragraph of the purport. It reads, by the influence of darkness, the conditioned soul forgets his relationship with the Supreme Lord and is overwhelmed by attachment, hatred, pride, ignorance, and false identification, the 5 kinds of illusion that cause material bondage. So the devotee can help the conditioned soul essentially remember this position. and become free from these 5 kinds of illusion. One thing this made me think of is there was one day we saw, it was actually quite disturbing. I don't know if you guys have ever seen like a fly get caught in a spider's web and it just like continues to buzz as like the spider slowly creeps like up to it and then just ultimately like kills it. It's actually really disturbing. I mean, we were talking about this the other day. Like, how, anyways, they're not dying in the same manner, but butva praliyate. Ultimately, all these flies are like, as we've seen, people leaving the kitchen door open. They're all over the temple, and they're meeting their inevitable deaths. But this made me think. It's described in Canto 2, Chapter 9, 28. If you could pull this up, who has the phone? The Supreme Lord is described by Lord Brahma as a spider which covers himself, and this covering essentially is completely and totally different, of course, to the covering of the living entity in ignorance. But he essentially says that, if you could scroll up a little bit. O master of all energies, please tell me philosophically all about them. You play like a spider that covers itself by its own energy, and your determination is infallible. So we see that the impersonalists don't have any proper understanding of spiritual nature. They can only conceive of that which is material. So because the living entity is conditioned by material nature, that which is, they can't properly conceive of that which is beyond that. So that it's described, I think, in Isha Upanishad. I don't remember the numbers. Saparyagach chukramakaya mavaranam asnaviram shutha papavidam. That the Supreme Lord, even though he plays like this, he covers himself by his energies. He's still the same self-sufficient philosopher who has been fulfilling the desires of all the living entities since time immemorial. So, once more again, our covering by the modes of material nature in ignorance is completely and totally different from the manner in which Krishna covers himself so that he can enjoy with his devotees. We see, of course, in the paintings on the wall, Krishna seemingly makes himself forget so that he can facilitate his pastimes. And we essentially, our covering is different in that we're covered in attempt to enjoy, but we just suffer as a result. We're completely in anxiety, which is why Vaikuntha the definition is the place of no anxiety. In the material world is one where, again, we're constantly kicked by Maya. We are suffering the pangs of material existence, and it's all an attempt to be this false proprietor of the material energy. So we forget our position. Krishna never does. He's always cognizant of his position. That is all the points I have. I'm ending a little early here, but I'm going to open up for questions, comments, corrections if anybody has any. Goodness, I'm sweating like
anything. It mentions in the translation about
16 or 17?
Yeah, the mind is like a product of the mode of goodness. And I'm pulling this up from the 11th canto. Oh, am I doing this wrong? Yeah. Sorry. Yeah, this thing is confusing. Hold on. Okay. Oh. Alright, Krishna. Anyways, you go.
So in the beginning of your class, you said like how it's not black and white, that everyone's either a demigod or a demon. You were saying that, and the example you gave was that the people who worship the demigods, they're actually demons.
They're ultimately still condemned, yeah.
But they aren't worshiping Vishnu, so I don't see how the example like helps. I'm just a little confused because
You're saying
it says specifically that those who worship Vishnu
Right.
are, But they aren't worshiping Vishnu.
No,
so-
they're not worshiping Vishnu.
So I'm a little
in one
confused
sense,
how
you
it,
could
like-
say that they're demons because they're worshiping demigods in pursuit of facilitating. They might be deemed pious in a sense. I mean, there are pious demons. I mean, Kamsa, he followed. No, not Kamsa. Yeah, and he followed religious principles to an extent, but I mean, he was still a complete and total demon. So, it might continue with your question if I.
I mean, I was just confused how it how it makes it seem that it's not. It seems pretty black and white to me, and that if you don't worship Vishnu, you're a demon. That's what it says. I mean,
Generally, so I'll say it like this. When I think of, or maybe this is just like, you could say context, I guess. When somebody will say like, oh, it's not so black and white, it means that there's underlying understanding that's to be had. It's not just like this or that without any sort of supporting basis. So when I say that it might just appear to be black and white, for example, I was at least attempting to convey that it might appear to be that, oh, Prabhupada is just completely and totally bashing people who don't worship Lord Vishnu. But there's a reason for this, you know. So in that respect, it's not black and white. There's a proper understanding to be had. You might see some people who say, I'm trying to think, if you take a stance and there's not, if I take a stance that, I don't know, football is better than basketball, and it's like that, and I like this is like a terrible example. I can't think of anything better though right now. But it's not like it's black and white in that there's what's the basis for the stance? Oh, just because I feel like it. There's not really much logical conclusion that could be drawn to support that. That's the point I was trying to drive home. So maybe saying black and white wasn't exactly the best term of use, but I was driving home that there's a very specific set of reasoning that the Prabhupada gives behind everything that he says. That's the larger point I'm trying to drive home. So does that answer that okay? Okay.
So the verse mentions the mind, which is a product of the mode of goodness, and just elaborating on this point is a passage from Purport, 11th Canto, Chapter 3, verse 16. From Vaikarika, false ego in the mode of goodness, appears the 11th sense, the mind, whose presiding deity is Aniruddha. From Taijasa, false ego in the mode of passion, comes intelligence, whose presiding deity is Pradyumna. When I read this, I was pretty confused. Anyways, if you don't have any answer to this or comment on it, it's okay. Maybe it's just a comment I'm making that's something interesting, but you'd think it's the other way around, that the intelligence is the mode of goodness and the mind is the mode of passion. But it's actually that the mind appears from the mode of goodness and the intelligence appears from the mode of passion. I guess it makes sense because Lord Brahma is made out of complete intelligence and he's employed in the mode of passion.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to speculate here, which I kind of feel a little prone to do. I mean, that's the thing is like, at least I'll speak for myself. Going through this is I just started reading this section probably like a week and a half ago, and I'm still in like Canto 3. I just reached chapter 16. The last chapter of this section, that Jai and Vijay being cursed by the sages. So anyways, I'm not picking up everything like in full as I go. I'll be like completely totally honest about that. To my understanding, I mean, the mind, the intelligence guides us in a sense. So that guidance can be. I'm not gonna speak on that. I hope maybe we can have a senior speak on that. I'm not gonna go down that road.
I just heard this. Literally, I just heard a lecture by His Holiness Bhakti Vikasa Swami Maharaj, and somebody literally asked the exact same question.
And they said.
And what Guru Maharaj said was that in the material world, everything is flipped topsy-turvy.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
In the material world, everything is flipped topsy-turvy. So pure intelligence is above the mind. But when you come in, he was explaining that, and when you come in the material world, everything is flipped. So the mind becomes above the intelligence, and it causes us. Actually causes us to bewilder. Our mind bewilders our intelligence actually when we're in the material world. But when we come to the level of spiritual consciousness, we have pure spiritual intelligence, and our intelligence dominates the mind. And he was explaining it like that, that when you're, as long as you're in material conditioning, your mind is going to dominate your intelligence, because it has, the only thing it does is accept and reject.
Yeah.
So the mind only accepts what's favorable for its gratification and rejects what's not favorable.
Right.
Your intelligence is just kind of pushed to the side. But when you come to Krishna consciousness, then your intelligence can actually, you develop your discrimination, sense of discrimination. So that's how he explained it. I thought it was interesting how he explained it.
Glad I didn't try to answer
Why
that.
is the mind the mode of goodness and the intelligence mode of passion?
Yeah, I think the Guru Maharaj was explaining just that it's flipped. So in spiritual consciousness, it is the other way around. But when you come in material consciousness and in the material world, the mind becomes predominant. It becomes the dominating factor over the intelligence. That's how he explained it. I mean, as far as getting into the intricacies of that, I see what you're saying, because I was also confused when I heard that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That don't make sense.
Yeah.
I don't think that explains why mind. Yeah, the mind is goodness and intelligence is passion. I don't know if there is an answer to it. But
That's just how he responded. That's how Guru Maharaj responded.
Chonan had something. I don't have much, if anything, to add to that, because I also don't know.
So in regards to this Sura and Asura, like you were saying that even Hiranyakashipu, he worshipped Lord Brahma in order to get the benediction he needed. So specifically that the line is differences between like the desire for sense gratification to just enjoy senses grossly, and then there's like different extents of that, which one does that in worship of Vishnu, like the demigods. They're Suras, but they're, like Indra, he's often he's just trying to just gratify his own senses, but he still does that in reference with Vishnu. So then that's like Sakama Bhaktas, in which they have mature desire. They have understanding, okay, yeah, there's Vishnu and he's the supreme, but I want to enjoy it. Whereas the Asuras, they worship the demigods in order to just enjoy, and they defy the position of Vishnu. So that is where the clear difference is. Because otherwise, yeah, it's not particularly just like the Suras is just completely devoted to Vishnu. There's different levels of the Suras too, of the demigods. So just like even within devotional service, devotees are called Suras, and then those who are non-devotees called Asuras, mainly because they, the Asuras, they just don't give Vishnu his proper position. They don't address him in his proper position. And then within the devotees, there's different levels, like Guru Maharaj describes how some devotees is just, I want to go to the heavenly planets and enjoy, and that's why I'm worshiping Vishnu. So there's different extents like that with the Suras and Asuras.
Thank you. Can I was going to ask, this isn't improper, but I haven't read this pastime yet, but like you have Bali Maharaj, who's a demon, but is simultaneously a devotee. So if you could speak on that also.
What about, is he Asura or Asura?
It's like, okay, so he's a Asura, but
he's an Asura, he's a demon.
But there's recognition, obviously, that's
but
there.
Like Vritrasura also. Vritrasura, he's a demon, but he actually is a devotee. So that's just a pastime in which this is glorifying Vishnu, glorifying the devotee. I mean, how that the particular body that one has, or the family that he's born in, or a particular position he may have in the material world, doesn't determine whether he can have devotion to Vishnu or not. So that's just an example of how, you can be in a demoniac family, but you're not of that demoniac nature.
Like
At the same time, he's called a demon.
Mm.
He's born in the family a demon, but in the true sense, he's not a demon, he's a devotee. So it's a pastime to exhibit that.
Thank you. Anybody? Neem?
So Giri had this question on the live. He said, the second verse you pulled up in the purport, Srila Prabhupada said demons cannot participate in this Krishna consciousness movement. How is that possible? Because Srila Prabhupada said if this movement is destroyed, it'll be due to demons in the disguise of devotees.
I'm sorry, he said the second purport I pulled up?
The verse of the second, the purport of the second verse. I think it's,
No, that was the first one I referenced.
that's what he said.
Can you pull up Gita chapter 17, verse 4? And his question was, how can demons engage in...
No, he said in the purport, Prabhupada said demons can't participate in the Krishna consciousness movement. And then he said, how is this possible? Because Srila Prabhupada said the movement would be destroyed. If it were destroyed, it'll be due to demons. In
Yeah,
disguise
I
as
mean,
devotees.
the way to understand that is that, I mean, you can engage them, but ultimately, demoniac qualities and tendencies can give rise to bad behavior and activities that are adverse to to practicing devotional service. So it's like that. I want to look at the purport specifically if I can.
I think it might have been the CC one.
Was it? Because in that case, that was the
I think it
first
was
one I
CC.
referenced in. Yeah, but I mean, just like
391.
I referenced Jayananda Prabhu, for example, how people who are just walking by, passing by, they're demons. I mean, hell, they're not even
Yeah, I think it said it there.
within the Vedic conception. They're
That's in the purport.
completely and totally engaged in sense gratification. He engaged them in devotional service, despite this. But it's not that we can expect.
Demons can.
Did you pull it up? You found it? So, Krishna consciousness movement. The Krishna consciousness movement is meant for devas or devotees. Demons cannot take part in Krishna conscious activities, nor can devotees in Krishna consciousness take part in demoniac activities, or work like cats and dogs simply for sense gratification. So, scroll up a little bit. Yeah, so to my understanding, when he's saying Krishna conscious activities, I think he's specifically referring to the 9 processes of devotional service, for example, because they don't have a taste for it. Now, if we look at who's this guy that comes around and helps a lot in the garden? Casey, for example, like farming. Of course, like Krishna likes cows, he's farming there, but I mean like. People who just farm in the material world, it's like there's not a direct connection, you could say, to Krishna consciousness. Now, the devotee, when you add a devotee in and he can engage this person, then it becomes Krishna conscious activity. But that aspect of Krishna consciousness will only exist so long as there's a devotee to engage the demon. If demons are essentially making up or consisting the majority of the movement, then absolutely it will just fall apart. So I think that's I hope that answers the question. It's not that they can't be engaged, but in the process of devotional service, it's like how if there's not a taste that's there, and if there's not a devotee to give them devotional service, because we only get devotional service from a devotee, and that's the only way it can possibly be attained. Which is why Krishna says that his devotees are more glorious than he is, because they can only attain the mercy of the Supreme Lord. Ultimately through getting the mercy of a devotee. So, Mr. Vaughn, could you or anybody else maybe add on to that if they want to, or elaborate if there's a point I'm missing? I hope that's okay. Like I think that covers it. But
Well, I was just gonna say, demons cannot take part in Krishna conscious activities. I mean, one may be like even a devotee here, myself, could be engaged in some activities, but not be in Krishna consciousness.
yeah,
And it may externally look like Krishna consciousness or Krishna conscious activities, but in actuality, it's mundane consciousness that is manifested at the time. So that's one simple understanding of this statement, that
Yeah.
demons cannot take part in Krishna conscious activities.
if I could also, it makes me in Kalki Prabhu's class that he gave yesterday, he made the point that you can engage in, like you said, going through the motions of devotional service for years, but until you actually, like, for example, when it comes to cultivating humility, if you don't actually try to internalize the the principles of humility, and actually, take it to heart and not just externally, render devotional service, but cultivate these qualities. And we could ultimately just say it's for show. So I guess that's also there. One has to, this practice of devotional service is to help us facilitate and rectify and correct our attitude. But if there's not an actual desire to do that ultimately, then whether we're doing it or not, you only get purified maybe to some extent. That's my understanding. That's how we do it.
Similar to those people at the airport who would see the devotees distributing books, like these businessmen, and they'd say, "Oh, I will distribute these books and make so much money," and then they would try, but because they don't have actual bhakti, they don't have any enthusiasm, they don't have any devotion, then they weren't able to do anything.
Yeah, it's there has to be a level of taste, a desire that's actually there to render service. So it's a great point. Yeah. Hoda?
I was reading. It's funny because what's considered as a devotee can be it's different understandings. It's like a loose. It's like a loose understanding. Because I think Lord Chaitanya says anybody who chants a holy name even once is a devotee.
Yeah.
But then I just read in Transcendental Diary. And somebody asked Prabhupada, why do some devotees fall down? And Prabhupada said, because he wasn't really a devotee. Prabhupada said a devotee never falls down. And I thought that was interesting because it's Prabhupada's pretty much, when he says in that context, he's referring to a pure devotee. A pure devotee never falls down. And it's and it says the Krishna consciousness movement is meant for the devas or devotees. And you see that demons are gradually weeded out. So those who come in with demonic, we all come in with demonic consciousness, but those who aren't actually reformed by the process because of certain underlying animosity or underlying ulterior motive, they're actually weeded out. But for those who are actually taken to the principles, they will become transformed into pure Vaishnavas. So I just think it's interesting that those who are demonic are actually, they can't, like Prabhu was saying, they can't stay in the movement. No matter how, they'll stay right, they might be around for some time, but eventually they'll leave.
Naturally, they'll gravitate back towards.
Yeah, they'll
towards
leave
Maya.
eventually.
The example I've heard His Holiness Bhakti Vikas Maharaj give is about a mango it's on the tree. In one sense, you might have a tree of mangoes. They're all mangoes, of course, but some actually get to the process of being fully ripened and others might not. So there's still mangoes, but obviously some fully, manifest into a fully ripened mango and others don't. So similarly, you could say in the loose sense that you could look and say that there's a room full of devotees, but some may or may not actually fully try to internalize the process. And they're in the looser sense, in the broader sense, we could say, okay, these are all devotees, they're practicing devotional service, but of course, there's gradations to it as well. It always depends. We always have to look at these things in proper context and light. So that's a great point. Anybody else? Anything else? Man, Mataji's? No? Okay. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai.